The morning after the child was born, Lyra woke to find herself in a room she did not recognize. The walls were soft and warm, glowing with a gentle light that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Her body ached in ways she had never experienced before. Every muscle felt like it had been burned and rebuilt. Kale and Mira lay on either side of her bed, their breathing shallow and slow. They had not fully woken since the birth. A Zetharian healer entered the room. Her form was humanoid but composed entirely of flowing crystal and pure light. She moved with a grace that seemed almost liquid, as if the laws of physics bent slightly around her. The healer examined Lyra with instruments that looked more like art than medicine, scanning her body with beams of colored light. "You have survived," the healer said, her voice like wind chimes and distant thunder. "Few beings could have done what you did. The energy you expended would have killed most creatures in our galaxy. The Queen instructed me to tell you that your sacrifice will be remembered forever in the archives of our people." Lyra tried to sit up but found her strength had not yet returned. "How long was I unconscious?" she asked. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears, raspy and thin. 3 days, the healer replied. "During that time, the princess has already grown significantly. Hybrid children mature at an accelerated rate. She will be walking within a week, speaking in a month, and reaching physical adulthood in approximately 5 of your years. Her mind will develop at an even faster pace. She is unlike anything we have ever created." Lyra looked at her dragons. Kale opened one massive eye and made a low rumbling sound in his throat. Mira did not move. Lyra felt a sudden rush of fear. "Are they going to be all right?" she asked the healer. "The dragons are resilient creatures, but what they gave cannot be replaced. They sacrificed a portion of their life essence. They will live, but they will never be as strong as they were before. This is the cost of their magic. This is the price they chose to pay." Lyra reached out and placed her hand on Kale's neck. The dragon's scales were cool beneath her fingers, and she could feel that his essence was dimmed. It was as if a candle had been burning at full brightness and now burned with only a fraction of its former flame. She had not fully understood the cost of what they had done. "There is something else," the healer continued. "The Queen wishes to make you an offer. She wants you to remain here in the palace as the child's guardian and protector. The Royal Council would grant you any resources you need, any technology or magic or living quarters. The child will need someone who understands the elder ways, someone who can teach her both paths. The Queen believes that you are the only one qualified for such a role." Lyra closed her eyes. She had spent the last 1,000 years wandering between worlds, rarely staying in one place for more than a few decades. The idea of remaining in one location, of becoming responsible for the upbringing of a child, was foreign to her. But she thought of the princess, this new being who represented something the galaxy had thought impossible. She thought of Kale and Mira and the sacrifice they had made. "Tell the Queen that I will stay," Lyra said. "But I will need to bring my dragons with me. They will need time to recover, and I will not leave them." "Of course," the healer said. The Queen anticipated this. "Your quarters have been prepared in the Tower of the Elder Gardens. There is a space there large enough for your dragons to recover. There is also access to the ancient libraries, should you wish to research the old magics further." Over the next several weeks, Lyra began to recover her strength. The healing chamber was filled with devices and spells designed to restore her depleted energy. Slowly, her color returned. Her eyes began to glow again with that inner light that all elder races possessed. Kale recovered before Mira. He could once again stand and move through the palace corridors, though he tired easily. Mira remained mostly dormant, her body conserving energy as it healed. The Queen visited Lyra regularly. Her name was Elendor, and she was far older than she appeared. In Zetharian years, she had lived for 5,000 cycles. Her form was breathtakingly beautiful, composed of crystal structures that seemed to shift and flow like liquid whenever she moved. She spoke to Lyra about her daughter with obvious love and wonder. "She is so curious about everything," Elendor said one afternoon as she sat beside Lyra's recovery bed. "She asks constantly about both her parents' peoples. She wants to know why humans have only 2 eyes, and why Zetharians glow with internal light. She wants to understand both her natures. I believe she will accomplish things neither of our peoples have ever attempted." "What about her father?" Lyra asked. "Has he adapted well to being part of the royal court?" "Marcus struggles," Elendor admitted. "The customs of our people are very different from those of humanity. He finds our formality cold at times, but he is a kind man. He loves our daughter fiercely. He has been learning our language and our ways. I believe in time he will be accepted fully by our court." When Lyra was finally strong enough to walk, The queen took her to meet the princess properly. The child was only 3 weeks old by human reckoning, but she already had the appearance of a 3-year-old human child. She had her mother's crystalline features, but softened by her father's more organic structure. Her eyes were a mixture of both her parents' eyes, deep blue with hints of violet light. The princess looked at Lyra with an intelligence that was almost unsettling in one so young. When Lyra extended her hand, the child reached out and touched it. Where the princess's fingers made contact with Lyra's skin, there was a gentle warmth and a sensation like music. The child spoke, though her voice was small and uncertain. "Pretty lady." Dragons. She had already learned to communicate, though her vocabulary was still limited. "I am Lyra," she said gently. "Those are my dragons. Their names are Kale and Mira, and I'm going to stay here and help you grow up." The princess smiled, and in that moment Lyra felt something shift within her heart. She had thought she had given all she could give, that the 300 years of her life and the magic she had expended were the total cost of this moment. But as she looked at this remarkable child, she realized that the true cost and the true reward were only just beginning. Marcus appeared in the doorway, carrying a bundle of flowers. He smiled when he saw Lyra and the princess together. "I wanted to thank you properly," he said. "The queen told me that you gave up 3 centuries of your life. I have tried to find words sufficient to express my gratitude, but I cannot. There are no words. All I can say is that my daughter exists because of you. My family exists because of you." Lyra stood and embraced the human man. She could feel the warmth of his body, so different from the cool crystalline form of the queen. This was the beauty of what they had created together, this union of 2 fundamentally different types of beings. The child reached out and took one of the flowers from her father's bundle. She brought it to her nose and breathed in deeply. She giggled, a sound like water flowing over stones. The palace began to change after that. Word of the princess and her existence spread across the galaxy. Ships arrived from every corner of known space. Ambassadors came from human colonies, from other Zetharian worlds, from the crystalline kingdoms of the north, from the digital minds of the machine collective. Everyone wanted to see this impossible child. The queen declared that the princess would be called Lyra, in honor of Lyra who had made her birth possible. This caused some stir among the more traditional members of the Zetharian court. But the queen's authority was absolute, and Lyra was a name that existed in both human languages and Zetharian, which made it perfect for a child of 2 worlds. Lyra was given chambers adjacent to the princess's nursery. She was provided with everything she could have asked for. Ancient texts filled the libraries of her rooms, volumes that contained knowledge from 1,000 different civilizations. She began to teach Lyra not just about magic and technology, but about the history of the galaxy, the rise and fall of civilizations, and the importance of preserving knowledge across generations. Kale recovered enough to walk the palace gardens regularly, though he remained weaker than before. Mira's recovery took longer. There were nights when Lyra would sit beside her smaller dragon and wonder if she would ever truly awaken again. But one morning, after almost 2 months of dormancy, Mira opened her eyes. She did not rise immediately, but she looked at Lyra with recognition and affection. It was enough. The Council of Unified Worlds made an official announcement. They declared that humanity and all its colonies would be bound as protectors of the Princess Lyra. Her life would be considered sacred, and any threat to her would be considered a threat to every member world of the Unified Council. This meant that resources from across the galaxy would be devoted to ensuring her safety and her education. Lyra realized that the weight of this responsibility was vast. The child she now cared for was more than just a daughter to 2 people who loved each other. She was a symbol of unity between species, a living proof that cooperation was possible across the boundaries that separated different types of beings. She was a hope for the future. As the weeks turned into months, Lyra watched the princess grow and learn and explore. She taught her about magic and science, about violence and compassion, about the history of her mother's people and the dreams of her father's people. 5 years passed like a single breath. The Princess Lyra had grown into a remarkable young woman who appeared to be about 15 years old in human terms. Her form was a perfect balance between her 2 heritages. Her skin had the faint luminescence of her mother's people, but with the warmth and flexibility of her father's. Her eyes could shift between the brilliant blue of human eyes and the violet glow of Zetharian consciousness. She moved with a grace that seemed almost unnatural, as if she existed in perfect harmony with the space around her. Lyra had remained at the palace throughout Lyra's childhood. watching her grow and learn and become someone who was truly unique in the galaxy. Kale had recovered most of his strength, though there remained a subtle dimness to his scales that would never fully return. Mira had become Liara's closest friend, the dragon's smaller form making her perfect for the child to ride when she was younger and to accompany on her frequent explorations of the palace and its gardens as she grew older. The Council of Unified Worlds had voted to offer Liara a position as the official ambassador between human space and Zetharian space. She would be the bridge between her two peoples, the living symbol of what was possible when different beings worked together. Liara had accepted this role with grace, though Lyra could see that it weighed heavily on her. To be a symbol was to carry responsibility far beyond what most young people could comprehend. One morning, Lyra received a message that changed everything. It came through the official communication channels of the Council, transmitted across light years from the human colonial administration. The message was brief and urgent. There had been an attack on a human settlement near the outer rim of known space. The attackers were unknown, but they were powerful. Dozens of people had been killed. The settlement itself had been destroyed, and among the dead was a relative of Marcus, Lyara's father. Marcus did not take the news well. Lyra found him in the palace gardens, standing motionless before a fountain of crystalline water that belonged to his daughter. His face was pale and tears streamed down his cheeks. How could this happen? He demanded of no one in particular. We were supposed to be protected, all of us. The Unified Council made that promise. They swore that no harm would come to humanity because of Liara's existence. Lyra approached him slowly and placed a hand on his shoulder. The Unified Council cannot protect every individual in every colony. They can only make their best effort. Whoever attacked that settlement, they attacked in secret. They did not give the Council a chance to respond. Marcus turned to face her, his eyes burning with pain and anger. This is what having a symbol for a daughter brings. This is what unity and peace looks like. Not safety. Not protection. Violence and loss and the death of people I loved. I should never have come to this world. I should never have met the Queen. I should never have allowed my daughter to be born into this burden. Lyra had no words that could comfort him. She understood his grief. She had lived long enough to see many tragedies, many losses. She knew that sometimes there was nothing that could make pain bearable. Sometimes the only choice was to endure it and hope that time would eventually ease the sharp edges of the wound. Liara came to find them in the gardens. She had heard the news through the palace communication systems. She moved to her father and embraced him. And for several long moments she simply held him as he grieved. Lyra watched from a distance, remembering how this young woman had begun her existence in such a moment of sacrifice and risk. She had been born into a world that wanted her to be perfect, to be proof that different beings could create something beautiful together. But Liara was also simply a young woman who now had to watch her father suffer. When Liara finally spoke, her voice was filled with a determination that Lyra had not heard before. I am going to find out who did this. I am going to understand why they attacked that settlement. And I am going to ensure that nothing like this ever happens again. Her father shook his head. It is not your responsibility. It is the responsibility of the Council. It is my responsibility precisely because I am who I am, Liara replied. I am the symbol of unity between our peoples. If I do nothing when humans are attacked, then what does that unity mean? If I sit in this palace and let the Council handle everything, then I am not a bridge between worlds. I am just a prisoner in a tower, used for state ceremonies and nothing more. Lyra felt something shift within her as she listened to these words. Liara had grown beyond being merely the princess, beyond being simply the proof that two different species could create offspring together. She was becoming someone who understood that being a symbol meant taking action, meant being willing to risk herself for what she believed in. Over the next several days, Liara began her investigation. She accessed the Council's databases and reviewed every piece of information about the attack. She spoke with the survivors who had managed to escape the destroyed settlement. She examined the weapons that had been used to destroy buildings and kill innocent people. Kale and Mira accompanied her everywhere. The dragons had become fiercer in their devotion to Liara as she grew older. They seemed to sense that this young woman was capable of changing the fate of the galaxy, and they were determined to protect her. Lyra accompanied them as well, offering her ancient wisdom and her understanding of the political complexities of the various civilizations. What they discovered was disturbing. The weapons used in the attack did not belong to any of the major civilizations in the Unified Council. They were older, far older, created by a civilization that had supposedly been extinct for thousands of years. The species called the Vorath had been known as conquerors and destroyers in ancient times. They had attempted to dominate the galaxy through warfare and subjugation, but they had been defeated in a great conflict that had ended with their civilization seemingly wiped from existence. If the Vorath have returned, a council member named Victoria said during an emergency session, then we face a threat unlike anything we have encountered before. They were nearly unstoppable the first time. We only defeated them through a coalition of all the races, and even then it took decades of warfare. Liara stood before the council, her young form radiating a presence that seemed far larger than her physical body. The Vorath attacked because they believe I should not exist. They believe that the unity between species is an affront to their beliefs. They want to prove that different beings cannot work together, that we will always turn on each other eventually. And how do you propose we respond? Asked Aelendor, Liara's mother. With wisdom, Liara replied, or with the same violence that they have chosen to use. A human representative named Sophia leaned forward. Young Liara, do you have a plan? I do, Liara said. I want to go to the Vorath homeworld. I want to meet with their leadership and understand why they have returned. I want to discover if there is any possibility for peace. The council erupted in argument. Some believed that such a mission was suicidal. Others thought it was brilliant. Humans and Zetharians and representatives from the machine collective all voiced their opinions. I will not allow my daughter to risk herself, Aelendor declared. The Queen's authority was final in her own chamber. With respect, Mother, Liara said, this is not a decision that belongs to you alone. I am also the ambassador of humanity. I am also the representative of the Unified Council. My father's people have the right to be heard. Marcus stood slowly. He looked at his daughter for a long moment. If you believe this is the right course of action, he said, then I support you. But you will not go alone. Lyra will go with you. The dragons will go with you. And I will go with you. Because you are not just a symbol, Liara. You are my daughter, and I will not let you face this danger by yourself. Aelendor looked at her husband with what might have been fury, but then her expression softened. She turned to Lyra. Will you keep her safe? I will do everything in my power, Lyra replied. Then go, Aelendor said, but know that if you fail, if my daughter does not return, the war with the Vorath will be the least of your concerns. The entire galaxy will burn. Preparations began immediately. A human warship called the Horizon was assigned to carry Liara and her companions to the coordinates, where the Vorath homeworld was believed to be located. The ship was captained by an experienced officer named Helen, who had fought against the Vorath in the ancient wars before the species had disappeared. As Liara prepared for the mission, Lyra found her in her chambers looking out at the stars. The weight of what you are about to do is immense, Lyra said. I know, Liara replied. I have been thinking about something you once told me. You said that the greatest strength did not lie in remaining pure and separate, but in becoming beautifully, wonderfully mixed. I was born from that philosophy. Now I have to prove that it is not just a beautiful idea, but something that can actually change the galaxy. Lyra placed her hand on the young woman's shoulder. Your father and I will be with you. The dragons will be with you. Whatever comes, we will face it together. Within a week, the Horizon left the orbital station and began its journey toward the Vorath homeworld. The ship traveled faster than light, covering vast distances in what would normally have taken months to traverse. The Vorath homeworld materialized out of the void like a scar in reality. It was not beautiful. The planet's surface was dark and cratered, covered in massive fortifications and weapons arrays that pointed upward toward the sky like the tentacles of some ancient sea creature. The atmosphere was thick and toxic, filled with pollutants that had accumulated over millennia. Even from orbit, one could see that this world had been shaped entirely for warfare. Captain Helen's hands moved across the control panels of the Horizon with practiced efficiency. This is worse than I remember, she said. The last time we encountered them, their weapons were advanced, but not like this. They have been upgrading their military capabilities significantly. Can we land safely? Marcus asked, standing beside the captain's command chair. He had dressed himself in the standard military uniform of the unified human forces. Though he looked uncomfortable in it, his face had lost weight during the journey, and his eyes carried the burden of a man who had left everything familiar behind. We can land, Helen replied. But whether we will leave again is another question entirely. They are detecting our ship. They are hailing us on all known frequencies. What do you want me to say? Liara stood at the view screen watching the planet below. I want you to tell them that I am coming to speak with their leadership. Tell them that I come alone with only my guardians. Tell them that I believe peace is still possible. Helen looked skeptical. That is a dangerous gamble. They are likely to see it as weakness. They may, Liara agreed, but I am not coming to speak to them as a warrior. I am coming to speak to them as someone who exists because I refuse to let the boundaries between species dictate my fate. If they respond with violence, then we will deal with that, but I will not come to them with weapons drawn. That would only prove that we are not so different from them. The message was sent. For a long silence, there was no response. Lyra could feel the tension in the air of the command center. Every person on the bridge of the horizon knew that they were in extreme danger. The Vorath had destroyed a settlement with hundreds of people. They would not hesitate to destroy a single ship if they perceived it as a threat. Finally, a response came. A deep, gravelly voice transmitted through the speakers. Unidentified vessel, you are in restricted space. Identify yourself and state your purpose. I am Liara, hybrid daughter of Queen Aelindor of the Zetharian Empire and Marcus of the human colonies. I have come to speak with your leadership about peace between our peoples. I request safe passage to your surface so that I may meet with your representatives in person. Another long silence. Then the response came again. This time it was different, colored with what might have been surprise. You are the hybrid. We have heard the stories. We have monitored the transmissions of the Unified Council. You are the symbol they use to demonstrate their unity. I am, Liara replied, and I have come to offer you something that the Vorath have never been offered before. I have come to offer you a chance to be part of that unity. I have come to offer you peace. The communication channel went silent. On the view screen, the weapons arrays on the planet's surface began to move, repositioning themselves. Helen's hands moved over the controls, ready to engage the ship's defenses at a moment's notice. Wait, Liara commanded. Do not attack. They are reconsidering. And then, slowly, a section of the planet's surface opened. A massive docking facility revealed itself. A hangar large enough to accommodate even a vessel the size of the Horizon. The weapons arrays lowered slightly, their aggressive posture becoming more neutral. You may land, the Vorath voice said. You are granted temporary sanctuary, but know that if this is a trick, if you attempt any hostile action, your ship will be destroyed before you can even complete a sensor sweep. Our hospitality is limited and conditional. It is understood, Liara replied. We are grateful for your consideration. As the Horizon descended toward the planet's surface, Lyra moved to stand beside Liara at the view screen. This is going to be extremely dangerous, she said quietly. I know, Liara replied, but it is the only choice I have left. If the Vorath will not listen to words, then nothing in the galaxy will stop them. We will be drawn into an endless war and millions will die. My existence was meant to prove that different beings could overcome their differences. Now I have to prove that I meant it. Marcus approached them, his expression grim. Whatever happens down there, we will face it together. That is what family does. The Horizon settled into the massive hangar with barely meters to spare on either side. The atmospheric processors activated, and within moments, the ship's systems indicated that it was safe to open the external doors. Captain Helen selected a small team to accompany Liara, including a medic and a communication specialist. But she insisted on remaining with the ship. I may be needed here if things go wrong, Helen said. Besides, this is your moment, Liara. You should not be distracted by concerns about your escape vehicle. The airlock opened, revealing a reception committee of Vorath soldiers. They were massive beings, standing nearly 3 meters tall with skin the color of burnt metal and eyes that glowed with a fierce amber light. Their bodies were covered with armor that seemed to be partially integrated into their flesh, and they carried weapons that looked like they could level mountains. But they made no move toward aggression. Instead, one of them stepped forward and bowed slightly. I am Commander Zorath. I have been instructed to welcome you and escort you to meet with our Supreme Leader. The Vorath Council wishes to hear what you have to say. As they walked through the corridors of the Vorath Fortress, Lyra could not help but marvel at the sheer scale of everything. Every room was massive, every ceiling high enough to allow the enormous Vorath to move freely. But more than the physical scale, what struck her was the overwhelming sense of military purpose. Every wall, every corridor, every space served a function related to warfare and defense. Kale and Mira walked beside Liara, their forms seeming tiny in comparison to the massive Vorath soldiers. But the dragons carried themselves with dignity and purpose, and Lyra could see that their presence was having an effect on the Vorath they passed. Some of the soldiers stopped to stare, as if seeing such creatures was unusual or unexpected. The Supreme Leader was waiting in a vast chamber that appeared to serve as both a war room and a throne room. The being that occupied the central position was even larger than the soldiers, and more heavily armored. This was Vex, the one who had led the Vorath's return to dominance in the galaxy. Vex observed Lyra as she entered, his massive eyes studying every detail of her form. "So this is the hybrid," he said, his voice like the grinding of tectonic plates. "I have seen the images transmitted by your unified council. I have read the reports of your abilities. They say you are something new, something that should not exist. I was born from the union of two peoples who were told they could never create offspring together," Lyra replied, her voice steady despite the fear that Lyra could sense in her. "My existence proved that belief wrong. I have come to tell you that your assumptions about the Vorath are also wrong." Vex rose from his position of command. He towered over Lyra, and Lyra found herself tensing, prepared to act if the Vorath leader made any move toward violence. But Vex simply walked closer, examining Lyra from various angles, studying her with the intensity of a researcher examining a new species. "You believe that unity is possible between our people?" Vex said. "You believe that the Vorath, who have spent millennia perfecting the art of war, who have rejected the soft ways of negotiation and compromise, can somehow be integrated into this utopian vision of yours?" "I do not believe that everyone will agree," Lyra said. "I do not believe that unity is inevitable, but I believe that the choice exists. I believe that being strong does not require being isolated. I believe that the Vorath have much to offer to the galaxy, and that the galaxy has much to offer to the Vorath." Vex made a sound that might have been laughter. "You are either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish. I have not decided which. Tell me, hybrid, why should the Vorath abandon the path of conquest and warfare? Why should we choose peace with species that have spent lifetimes trying to destroy us?" "Because the cycle of violence must end somewhere," Lyra replied. "Someone has to be brave enough to step away from the endless cycle of attack and retaliation. Someone has to choose to believe that a different future is possible. I am asking you to be that someone. I am asking your people to take the first step toward peace." Vex was silent for a long time. His amber eyes searched Lyra's face, looking for signs of deception or weakness. Finally, he spoke again. "I will make you an offer. There is a matter that troubles my people, something that has driven much of our recent military activity. If you can help us resolve this issue, if you can prove that peace is not merely a naive dream but something that can actually bring practical benefit to the Vorath, then I will consider your proposal. I will consider the possibility of peace." "What is this matter?" Lyra asked. "The Vorath homeworld is dying," Vex said simply. "The centuries of warfare and weapons testing have poisoned our world beyond what our technology can repair. Our people are suffering. We have been attempting to conquer new worlds because we have no choice. We need a place to live. We need resources to save our dying civilization. We need a future." 3 years after the mission to the Vorath homeworld, the galaxy had begun to transform. What had started as a desperate bid for peace had become a thriving alliance. The Vorath civilization had submitted itself to the Unified Council, not out of force but out of genuine desire to be part of something greater than themselves. The restoration of their world was proceeding faster than anyone had dared to hope. Lyra had become far more than the symbol she had been at her birth. She had evolved into a true leader, someone whose word carried weight across every civilization in the known galaxy. She was invited to peace conferences and trade negotiations. She was consulted on matters of policy and strategy. Most importantly, she had become someone whom people believed could actually make a difference in the world. But success had come with its own costs. Lyra rarely spent time at the palace anymore. She was constantly traveling between worlds, constantly engaged in the delicate work of maintaining the alliances she had helped to forge. Marcus had eventually returned to human space, where he worked as an advisor to the colonial government, helping to integrate human interests into the larger galactic community. Aelendor remained the queen of the Zetharian Empire, but even she had been drawn into the web of galactic politics that Lyra had helped to create. Lyra had remained constantly by Lyra's side. They had developed a relationship that went beyond that of guardian and ward. They had become true partners in the work of building peace. Lyra had finally found the purpose that had eluded her for centuries. She was no longer simply wandering between worlds, searching for meaning. She had found it in this young woman who embodied everything that was possible when beings chose to overcome their differences. Kael and Mira had also undergone transformations. The sacrifice they had made at Liara's birth had marked them forever, but they had gradually learned to live with their diminished power. They had channeled what remained of their strength into becoming ambassadors themselves, using their unique connection to Liara to help bridge communication gaps between different species. They had become symbols of sacrifice and unity in their own right. But there were those who opposed everything that Liara stood for. On the fringes of the galaxy, in the dark spaces between stars, there existed groups of extremists who saw her as a threat to their way of life. Some were human purists who believed that humanity should never have integrated so fully with alien species. Some were Zetharian supremacists who viewed the hybridization of bloodlines as a corruption of their people's purity. Still others were representatives of species that had lost power and influence in the new order and sought to reclaim what they had lost. The first real test came when a bomb exploded in the Central Parliament of the Unified Council. Dozens of people were killed, including 3 council members. Liara had been just outside the Parliament building when it happened, meeting with representatives from a group of human colonies. She had been thrown to the ground by the force of the explosion, but had escaped serious injury. Lyra found her in the emergency medical center afterward, being treated for minor burns and lacerations. Liara was conscious and alert, already demanding information about the other survivors and attempting to help coordinate the emergency response, even as doctors tried to treat her injuries. It was an assassination attempt, Liara said grimly as Lyra entered her room. They were targeting the council, trying to destabilize everything we have built. Do we know who was responsible? Lyra asked. Not yet, but I suspect it was one of the extremist groups. This is their response to our success. They are afraid that we have changed things too much, that the old ways of living are disappearing forever. Over the following weeks, a careful investigation began. The forensic evidence pointed to a human extremist organization called the Ancestral Purity Collective. They had manufactured the bomb and coordinated the attack, but they had been funded and supported by outside forces. Individuals within the Zetharian elite who feared the loss of their cultural identity, representatives of a merchant class that had lost influence in the new economic system. The revelation that multiple species were involved in the conspiracy sent shockwaves through the galaxy. If beings could work together toward violence as easily as they could toward peace, what did that mean for everything that had been accomplished? What did it mean for unity if the very structures they had built could be turned into weapons against their ideals? Lyra made a decision that shocked many people. Instead of calling for punishment, instead of demanding that those responsible face execution or imprisonment, she called for a truth and reconciliation process. She wanted to understand what had driven these beings to attempt murder. She wanted to know what fears and insecurities had motivated them. It was a controversial choice. Many in the council demanded that she reconsider. They argued that mercy would be seen as weakness, that it would encourage further attacks. But Liara was firm in her conviction. She had been born from a mother who had chosen to risk everything for the possibility of something new. She had been raised by an elf woman who had sacrificed centuries of her life for unity. She would not betray those sacrifices by resorting to the old patterns of revenge and retribution. The truth and reconciliation process lasted for months. Perpetrators and survivors alike came forward to share their stories. Some of the conspirators expressed genuine remorse for their actions. Others clung to their beliefs that they had been right to act. But the process itself became transformative. As people heard the stories, as they began to understand the human factors behind the conspiracy, something shifted in the galactic consciousness. The universe began to accept that unity did not mean uniformity. It did not require that everyone think the same way or believe the same things. Unity simply meant being willing to coexist, to communicate, to seek solutions that honored all perspectives while serving the greater good. Lyra watched this entire process unfold and marveled at what Liara had become. There was a moment one evening when they were alone on the observation deck of their diplomatic vessel, watching a blue star slowly set beneath them. Lyra spoke words that she had been holding back for years. When I was younger, I did not truly understand the cost of what I had done, Lyra said. I gave up 300 years of my life to bring you into the world. I thought I understood the sacrifice. I thought I knew what I was giving up. But I was wrong. I did not know then what I know now, that this sacrifice has allowed something far greater than I ever imagined. Watching you work for peace, watching you transform your enemies into your allies, seeing the galaxy begin to change because one being decided that things could be different. I realize now that I gave up 300 years of an ordinary life to be part of something extraordinary. Liara took Lyra's hand and held it gently. You have taught me everything I know about strength and sacrifice, but you have also taught me something else. You have shown me that sacrifice is not about suffering. It is about choosing to give something of yourself because you believe in a future that is better than the present. Every choice I make, every moment I spend working for peace, every time I choose to listen instead of fight, that is honoring the sacrifice you made. That is making your gift mean something. They stood together in silence as the blue star disappeared below the horizon, and the lights of the galaxy began to emerge in the darkness above. Somewhere out in that darkness, civilizations were learning to coexist. Beings who had once been enemies were learning to work together. The Varath were rebuilding their world with technology donated by their former adversaries. Human scientists were collaborating with Zetharian researchers on projects that neither species could have accomplished alone. But the challenges were far from over. There remained worlds that had not joined the unified council, species that still clung to the old ways of isolation and distrust. There were those who believed that peace was a sign of weakness, that only through strength and conquest could civilization truly progress. And there were always those who would exploit the fears and insecurities of others for their own personal gain. Liara was offered a position that she had never sought. The unified council asked her to become their supreme representative, the single individual who would speak for all member worlds in matters of policy and direction. It was a position of immense power and immense responsibility. It would mean giving up any semblance of a private life. It would mean dedicating the remainder of her existence to service to the greater good. She consulted with Lyra before giving her answer. Do you think I should accept? Liara asked. I think the question is not whether you should, but whether you can live with yourself if you do not, Lyra replied. We have spent our time together trying to prove that different beings can work together. We have sacrificed much to that goal. Now you are being asked to take that sacrifice to its logical conclusion. You are being asked to devote your life to it completely. I will still have you, Liara said. I will still have Kael and Mira. I will still have my father's wisdom and my mother's strength. I will not be alone in this. Then you have your answer, Lyra said simply. Liara accepted the position. She took an oath before representatives from every species in the galaxy, promising to serve the cause of peace and unity. 50 years had passed since Liara was born. It seemed impossible that so much time could have elapsed so quickly. In many ways, it felt like only yesterday that Lyra had stood in that palace healing chamber, exhausted and depleted, having just pulled a hybrid child into existence against all odds. In other ways, it felt like an entire lifetime had passed in those 50 years. Because in truth, it had. Lyra was still physically young by the standards of the elder races, but she had aged in subtle ways. The strain of the decades of work, the constant pressure of maintaining peace and unity, the weight of knowing that the entire structure of galactic civilization rested partly on her shoulders. All of it had marked her. There were threads of silver in her once pure black hair. There were lines around her eyes that spoke of countless hours spent in serious contemplation. Her movements, once fluid and effortless, now carried a slight stiffness that suggested weariness of a kind that went beyond the physical. Liara was now fully adult, her appearance having stabilized at what would have been approximately 30 years old in human terms. But her mind was far more mature than her appearance suggested. She had ruled as the supreme representative of the Unified Council for nearly 50 years. And in that time, she had guided the galaxy through challenges that had once seemed impossible to overcome. The extremist movements had not disappeared, but they had been marginalized. As more and more individuals experienced the benefits of cooperation between species, as trade flourished and scientific advancement accelerated because of shared knowledge, the appeal of isolation and purity had faded. There would always be those who clung to old ways, but they were increasingly the exception rather than the rule. The Vorath had become fully integrated into galactic society. Vex had stepped down from leadership after the first 2 decades of peace, passing control to a younger generation that had been born into a world of cooperation rather than conquest. The Vorath homeworld had been restored to ecological health. Their people had begun to spread outward into the galaxy, establishing colonies and research stations, no longer as conquerors but as partners in the great work of civilization. The Zetharians had undergone their own transformation. The rigid class structures that had once defined their society had slowly dissolved. They had become less focused on maintaining their cultural purity and more interested in participating in the rich tapestry of galactic culture. Aelendor had eventually passed her crown to a council of elected representatives, choosing to spend her final centuries as an ambassador and advisor, rather than as a monarch. Humanity had perhaps benefited most from the integration. Human scientific advancement had accelerated dramatically, when combined with the knowledge of species that had been advanced long before humans first developed written language. Human colony worlds had thrived as part of the unified galactic economy. The small, fragile species that had once existed on the edges of known space had become central players in determining the future of the galaxy. But the greatest transformation had been in the concept of civilization itself, the idea that different beings could work together, that cooperation was stronger than conquest, that unity did not require uniformity. This had become the foundational principle of galactic society, and all of it could be traced back to one moment, one impossible birth. One elf woman's sacrifice. Lyra was invited to a ceremony commemorating the 50th anniversary of Liara's birth. The entire ruling council of the unified worlds gathered in the great amphitheater that orbited the planet of Meridian, the same planet where Liara had been born. Representatives from every species, every world, every civilization that was now part of the unified council, came to celebrate what had been accomplished. Liara gave a speech that was remembered for the rest of history. She spoke about the power of sacrifice, about the willingness to risk everything for something that might not succeed. She spoke about her mother, who had risked her own life to give birth to something new. She spoke about her father, who had chosen love over the security of his own kind. And most of all, she spoke about Lyra. She came to my birth as a stranger, Liara said, her voice carrying across the great hall where billions watched through live feeds from across the galaxy. She gave 300 years of her life so that I could exist, but she did not just sacrifice for my life. She sacrificed for a future where beings like me could exist without shame, where the union of different peoples could be celebrated rather than condemned. She sacrificed so that the galaxy could become something greater than the sum of its parts. After Liara finished speaking, she called Lyra to the stage. The elf woman rose from her seat and walked forward. Her movement was slower than it had been 50 years ago, but there was still grace in every step. When she reached Liara, they embraced. It was a simple gesture, but it carried the weight of everything they had accomplished together. The council presented Lyra with the highest honor that the unified worlds could bestow. It was a title that had never existed before, created specifically to honor her unique role in the transformation of the galaxy. She was named the Eternal Guardian of Unity, a recognition that her sacrifice had not been a single moment but a continuous choice to devote herself to the greater good. Marcus was there to witness the ceremony. He had aged into his final decades, his human lifespan drawing to a close in a way that the longer-lived species could never fully comprehend. He wept openly as he watched his daughter honor the woman who had made her life possible. He had given up everything he had known when he chose to love a Zetharian and father a daughter who could never truly belong to either of her parents' worlds. Seeing the result of that choice, seeing the vast galactic civilization that had been built on the foundation of that one union, he felt at peace. But not everyone celebrated. There were still those who saw what had been accomplished as a betrayal of true values. Extremist cells continued to exist in the darker corners of known space. There were occasionally terrorist attacks, occasional acts of violence perpetrated by those who believed that the old ways were better than the new. But these acts had become rarer and less impactful. The vast majority of the galaxy had moved forward. In the years following the anniversary celebration, Liara began to make preparations for a transition. She was growing weary of the constant pressure, the endless negotiations, the burden of being the symbol that held everything together. She began to train a successor, a young woman named Elena, daughter of a human father and a crystalline alien mother. Elena embodied the same spirit of unity that Liara did, the same belief that cooperation was possible and desirable. When Elena finally took over as supreme representative, Liara stepped back from her position of authority for the first time in 50 years. She did not disappear entirely. She remained an advisor and consultant, offering her wisdom when it was sought. But she finally allowed herself to rest. She and Lyra spent their final years together in a retreat located on a planet that existed as neutral ground between all species. It was a beautiful world with crystalline mountains and forests that seemed to exist in all colors at once. Kale and Mira lived with them there, the dragons now very old but still vital in spirit if not in strength. One evening, as they sat watching 3 suns set, Lyra spoke to Liara about the future. "I will not live much longer," Lyra said. "The elder races age slowly, but we are not immortal. Eventually, even we reach the end of our years. When I am gone, I want you to know that my sacrifice was not just for you. It was for all of this. It was for every being in the galaxy who now has the choice to live in peace instead of conflict." Liara took the old woman's hand and held it gently. "Your sacrifice made everything that followed possible, but you were never just a guardian. And you were never just a guardian angel watching from the shadows. You were the architect of a new kind of civilization. You showed us all that it was possible to choose a different path." They sat together until all 3 suns had disappeared and the stars emerged to light the darkness. Below them, the planet turned. And on that planet and on all the worlds connected to it through the bonds of the Unified Council, beings of 1,000 different kinds lived and worked together. They shared knowledge and resources. They celebrated their differences instead of fearing them. They built a future that none of them could have created alone. And somewhere in that vast tapestry of civilization, there existed a small but growing population of hybrid children. Beings born from the union of different species, each one proof that the future that Liara had fought for was not just a beautiful ideal, but something tangible and real. Each one a living embodiment of the truth that unity was stronger than purity, that cooperation was more powerful than conquest, that love could bridge gaps that seemed insurmountable. Lyra closed her eyes as the stars wheeled overhead. She had given 300 years of her life so that a child could be born. She had spent 50 years helping to guide a galaxy toward peace and cooperation. Now finally she could rest. The work would continue without her. The future would unfold because of countless beings making countless choices to support the structures she had helped to build.